decided to meet with Andreas.
Hello.
who are really considered to be a major contributor to the guitar community here in Denmark and in the rest of the world, since we're on the internet. So look out for this major player.
Thank you.
How do you come up with a practicing plan, or do you design anything specific that you see that you need or miss in your playing?
Yeah, I mean it's really centered around what kind of musical goals I have at the moment. It can be songs that I'm trying to learn, things that I'm composing myself, and crazy parts that I can come up with that I have to learn in order to pull them off properly. And then also, just technical goals. Really, I mean, a lot of shredders, I think, have that kind of athlete motivation and mindset where it's just also about pushing your own boundaries as much as you can, not necessarily because you have any musical goals at the moment, maybe because it's just fun or interesting to see how far I can go. And also I remember John Petrucci said that in order to play anything you might come up with anywhere along the road of your musical experience. So it's really I try to cover what I see the fundamental techniques, alternate picking, sweep picking, legato and tapping, and how I cover them can vary greatly, and also how much. For example, at the moment I'm working on some multi-finger tapping because I came up with a really cool part for a song. So the tapping practice that I'm having at the moment is really a lot of that, and it has a musical purpose as well, so it makes it more inspiring and keeps me going because I can see where it will go eventually, and kind of visualize myself playing it.
Cool, but now that you say this, are you ever in doubt if you practice to prove something, or do you always say to yourself something like, this needs to have a musical purpose, I need to have this technical skill in order to get my point across with the music that I make, or do you ever think this there's really no need for me to do this? This is just some kind of a personal goal. I actually played this picking pattern at the speed of 400 and 600 or something. I recently saw this guy playing Flight of the Bumblebee.
Yeah, I saw that. It's ridiculous. And that was not Thiago de la Vega, right? It was somebody else.
Some American dude.
And then I saw Thiago de la Vega came back, and I think he played even faster.
More than 600?
I didn't see the entire video. I didn't watch it because it's just like. But
it's fun, but it sounds.
It sounds all.
I don't want to say anything negative. I think that's fun, but it's clearly that it's for the book of records and nothing else than that. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, that's cool. But well.
So you never have that problem where you think, where you say to yourself, is this something that I do because I want to prove something to myself or the people that I'm around, or is this something that I do because I need this skill to be able to make the music that I love?
Well, I practice a lot really to accomplish what I have to play in the music that I write. That's I really try to make that my main goal, to have a musical purpose with what I do, but I definitely also have some sort of small satisfaction in being able to improve myself just for the sake of it, really. I don't know if it's like an athlete thing, really. What is the purpose of being able to run 100 meters at 9 seconds or whatever it is? That's not that much different from 9.10, but then again there is, right? And I think it's sort of the same, but for me, with technique, that I want to improve myself also just for the sake of it.
I really believe that if you don't do this, if you don't improve in some way on your instrument or in your life in general, well, then you don't have. I think you'll stop being interested in music in general. Actually, I think because I also see people who stop practicing and stop having an interest in music in general. I see that they become less productive and they don't improve in the way they compose. They compose the same shit they composed 10 years, 15, 20 years ago. So if you don't have an interest, if you're not hungry for improving, and then I just think everything stops. So I think the technical side, if that's the one of the things that you choose to improve on, then it's just such a natural side of the human to. So of course you will improve the technical and your technical abilities. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is how do you find the motivation to practice? Do you ever lose interest, or do you ever lose that hunger for the passion for the instrument?
Well, I'd say at times, if I practice too intense on something, and I kind of tend to burn out myself. I've done that a couple of times. Sometimes it just becomes too much. If I work too much in technique and kind of forget the musical side a little bit at times, maybe stop writing a bit because I'm really inspired to practice at a point, and then I kind of just keep going down that route and don't get back to writing music again. Then I kind of tend to burn out at some point. So that's happened sometimes, and it happens. I think it's natural if you do something so much and don't kind of keep it fresh, don't do enough new stuff, but just keep going down the old path. Then eventually, you will get tired. So what really helps, to keep me inspired and get me inspired again, if I have a period like that, is really inspiration. Taking things in from the outside. Awesome shredders. I mean, we have the internet and YouTube, and there's an endless resource of awesome guitar shredding there. And music as well. Finding new bands, listening to new genres of music, because I really think there's just so much out there that you can get inspired from. Really taking a new kind of view on something, working on a new kind of technique, or revisiting some old stuff that you haven't been playing for a long time. There's a lot of new stuff happening on the music scene, and I think there are many interesting things going on that you can really get inspired from. Things that are new, creative people that come up with cool things, and you can kind of find something in that, and hey, that's cool, I want to take that in myself. What's he doing? How can I turn it into my own thing then, and developing into something new, and then all of a sudden you're going down some different route, doing something new, and you're not burned out any longer. So I think usually when I've burned out, or always, it's been on technique, so sometimes leaving the technique alone a little bit and playing something maybe not especially technical but musical.
It's really funny that you say this, because many years ago I remember when I was just completely obsessed by practicing the instrument, and it was like when I woke up I started practicing until I went to bed. So but I experienced exactly the same that you're talking about, and I remember what got me back on track was also doing something very very simple, and actually starting playing some really simple songs, because I got so far away from what it was all about, creating music. So, and that really helped me back on track, and I think it was kind of a lesson for me to not get embraced by that whole mechanical side of the instrument. And this is funny, because as we were talking about that it's natural and it's very human to want to improve and progress all the time, then of course there is still the you still need to keep that to keep the essential goal or whatever about what it is you're doing. This is not a sport. This is actually music. It's an art. Not saying that sport is not an art, but
well, it's sport.
there still needs to be, for my sake anyway, there still needs to be a purpose of practicing, and this might be not to say that these people are wasting their time, because that's not me to judge. It's not for me to say, but when you sit down and you spend your time being able to play some kind of musical piece at a very, very high speed, it just seems to me that it seems like that you might as well go out and do some kind of a sport, because I think that the musical purpose is lost. Even though I really love the all the technical side of music, and for me it gives a very a lot of pleasure just being able to play the things that I can come up with in my head, but still I think there is that essential goal of making music at some point. So what are your thoughts on all the new generation of shredders compared to the 80s and 90s, all that whole shrapnel thing that was going on in the especially in the 80s, but also the 90s, compared to what's happening now? What do you have any? What's your personal taste, and what are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on right now. I mean, obviously back in the 80s and 90s, there was sort of, the neoclassical shredding, and then there was sort of a more fusion like Frank Gambale and Alan Holdsworth and those guys. And that was kind of separate. And what has happened now is a new generation of shredders have kind of grown up on both of these things. So they borrow from both sides. They have the neoclassical, very triad, based arpeggios, and harmonic minor scales and diminished tonalities and things like that. But then they also have the fusion side of things, which is maybe a more altered chords and more interesting note choices. I think more exotic scales and sounds. So I think it's a blend of those two kind of original shred genres, and then of course as we were talking about, with speed, things they keep getting more and more extreme. People keep getting faster, and you see younger and younger people shredding. I mean, some of them really in the single digit age still. In 9 or 8 years old, playing pretty tough things. So I think it's all just developing and going into a more and more extreme kind of territory. I mean, also that would be logical. I mean, the human race. It is an exploring race. We've always been exploring, far reaches of the earth, and now we're exploring space and science and everything. And I think it's just the same. Once something is kind of like done, we want to move on.
I agree.
And it will probably keep going like that. I mean, we've had in classical music, you've had these kind of like really talented children, that are playing extremely complex stuff at very young ages. But I think in shred guitar it's kind of like a newer thing, so it's starting to happen now.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, it's a natural development as we've seen in classical music earlier. And then, with the instrument itself getting more and more extreme, more and more strings on there. I mean, 8-string is pretty much a standard repertoire for many bands now. Just 5 years ago it was really mostly Meshuggah who did that.
Yeah.
I mean, 7 strings, I think they were from like the 90s or something. Steve Vai, I think he...
with Passion and Warfare.
Yeah.
I think that's from 1990.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about that one was you actually didn't notice him play a 7-string, and I only think he...
distinctive, I think.
No, not at all. Some shredders who started using 7-strings more, and there's a lot of great guys, but I just remember that even before I got a 7-string myself, I don't think I was jealous that I didn't have one, but I just remember that, funny enough, that if you got a new CD and the guy was playing a 7-string, then all the songs was in B minor, and it was very predictable. I think it was very predictable, and there was a lot of guys in the beginning that didn't really explore the instrument and didn't really use the instrument. And the funny thing is that actually, I think when Awake came out, I think John Petrucci did some incredible things and did some. He was really using that 7-string in a purpose that I thought, this is awesome. This really this makes sense to have a 7-string now to me as well. And the funny thing, I remember you were saying that there was a lot of guitar players, a lot of great guitar players out there who actually had this album as a reference for composing themselves. And which is really cool.
Yeah, I've heard like many guitar players, like for example the guys from Periphery, say that really until Dream Theater, John Petrucci started using 7 strings, it was really Korn who did it the most, and they just went for that low range only, and John Petrucci started using the whole thing as as a whole, really, as what it could be, compiled all together.
Cool, really cool riffs. In something like 89 up through the 90s, there was only a few players. Maybe it's also because of the internet, so we didn't know. but there was only a few players who was really up there. Was just a huge gap between the best players and then all the rest. Yeah, and then the rest. But I think the technical side has become more. I see very young players today who's only been playing very few years who play extremely well. If you took one of those guys and went back 15 or 20 years, you just think, what? How could you? Because there's such a huge amount of information from YouTube, and if you really set your goals and set your mind to obtain that kind of level, playing fast and stuff like that, you can do it in a kind of a short period of time.
Yeah.
So I think the music has improved even more, but
I also think maybe those guys were also around in the 80s and 90s. I mean, we don't know, because I think the guys that got up there back then and the guys that got views, because the YouTube wasn't around, the guys that really got out there were the ones that had the musical identity as well and had something to offer musically, because nowadays there are a lot of shredders out there that play ridiculously fast, but they don't write anything themselves, or they don't. If they write anything themselves, it's just not interesting, I think, because they are so focused on the technique that they can't really look beyond, and it just becomes really technical exercises, exercises string together. Really.
One funny thing I just want to add is I actually remember when I started out being really obsessed with the instrument, I took some lessons from a guy who was pretty hard in Copenhagen, and he showed me some scales, some 3 string scales, and just a few sweep picking arpeggios. And from him I learned about Paul Gilbert. But at that time I was a huge Steve Vai fan, still is actually. But not Malmsteen, of course. But I remember that when I got the Perpetual Burn album with Jason Becker. I remember I had it on cassette tape. It was really funny, and I took it to my teacher, and I said, "Hey, I want to learn this," and he said, "I can't teach you this." I was so surprised because I thought this guy can do anything, but he didn't even want to touch this.
No.
It was just.
Was it because it was just too extreme?
It was too extreme.
So was he like enraged?
No, not at all. He was just like, he gave up. This is too crazy. And that's funny because I actually experienced this with a few guys. Also, I read an interview with. Getting back to that story is, which is I think really quite funny. Another thing is, at that time, the guys who wanted to be great and to obtain this level of guitar playing, there was no place to go. The only thing you could do is start to try to learn from the albums and learn their chops. I remember that I was, from vinyl albums, I was learning Richie Kotzen chops.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah,
So I mean today. With the sweeping and the tapping, which was crazy at that time.
The sound was just really special.
Yeah,
the bends and tap bends and
I only found 2 guys who did it. I think it was Richie and maybe also Greg Howe, but I'm not sure.
No.
He was also a big influence on me anyway. But there was nowhere to go. So what you could do was I found out about these REH videotapes. I got one. I got one with Richie Kotzen and one with Greg Howe and Paul Gilbert and all those guys. So that became my way of learning all the extreme stuff. And I remember some years later, I read an interview with, I think it was Vernon Reid from Living Colour, and I remember he was talking about Sean Lane, and he wasn't really doing this technique, but I remember he also talked about, maybe it was Richie Kotzen, but he was talking about this whole idea of sweep picking combined with tapping. He said, I give up. This is too crazy. Not in a fuck this because I'm doing my stuff and that's the right thing to do. He was so cool about it. He was just, this is so insane. He was just like, I don't even want to try it. It's so funny. Another subject I just want to touch about is visualization, because I remember I was using this a lot, even though I didn't know anything about it. For some reason I just came up with this idea. I remember it was actually because I was listening to Tony McAlpine. I was just mesmerized about that thing. He was moving from position to position, even though I couldn't actually see him do it, but it was just very clear that he was moving all over the neck. And I really wanted to obtain this, and I came up with this idea of visualizing the positions and see them all, the whole neck, because it was for me it was kind of a thing that opened up the possibilities of playing all over the neck, as opposed to just playing the scales, because it was more vertical kind of playing, which was very limiting in a way, I think. So the visualization for me has helped me a lot, and I just wanted to know if this is also something that you've been working with.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When I learned scales, I don't have the Holsworthian amount of scales, but the central scales, I see, like the church modes, and then the harmonic and melodic minor as the main ones, then those scales, I really work with applying all over the neck, because to me, if you just learn one position or learn the positions isolated, it really doesn't unlock the sound you can really get from the very intervallic, wide leaps, because you're just locked in that one box or that scale position. So absolutely, seeing them over the neck, visualizing them over the neck, helps a lot with improvisation, but to me it's just the first step, really being able to visualize the scales, because then you have to kind of link your musical ear to your visualization, because you have to also be able to figure out, well, what notes that I'm visualizing do I have to move to in order to play what I'm hearing in my head. So it's a very vital step in developing improvisational skills, and when paired with musicality and really creativity in your mind and being able to express yourself immediately, it becomes a very, very powerful thing.
Yeah, I think the whole way that the guitar is just is the way it's built is very. You don't get that natural view of the notes.
Not like a piano or.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's the reason that the first thing that guitar players learn, myself included, is very box shaped. From both the scales and the bar chords and stuff like that. So really to be able to open that whole world of being able to see all the possibilities on the instrument, I think the visualization, for me anyway, played a huge role.
Like the piano, for an example, that is very, very logically designed, where you have your notes laid out in front of you. I mean, some of the first things you learn is to just find the notes, and what are the notes, the different keys, what notes are they. And to me, I don't see why you shouldn't learn that on the guitar as well. I mean, it's such a fundamental thing on the piano, because it's obviously pretty easy as well. But I mean, it is very fundamental, and although it is tougher to obtain on the guitar, I think it's a very important thing to work towards. I mean, kind of like having your own piano keys across the strings and across the positions on the guitar. They are not marked, so you have to mark them with your mind.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think it's wrong to play more than 7 strings, because I don't have an 8-string guitar.
I think it's wrong to play less than 8. I don't have